Hey guys, David here, coming to you from Churchfront headquarters, here with Jake Gosselin from Churchfront. If you follow us at Sunday Sounds, you've probably seen Jake's content on YouTube as well. We're actually here in Denver. We shot some new content for keys players that's going to be going on the Churchfront channel that I'm really excited about. Jake and I both have a background in worship leading. We've led for church plants, for mobile churches, and today we're going to be talking about how worship leaders can change their mindset to empower the keys players at their church. So, Jake, first off, thanks for having us here, and I'm really excited to talk about this with you. So,
I also want to mention and brag that David is going to be my keys player tomorrow morning at church. So
that's right.
That was, we decided since I needed a keys player this Sunday, our other keys players weren't available. It's like, David, I need a keys player. Fly over here to Denver. Let's do it. And then we decided it was convenient to just shoot some videos too while you're at it.
That's right. It was mostly just that you had an empty slot on Planning Center.
Yep.
So, but Jake is such a heavy hitter. When he needs you, you just show up wherever he asks. So, okay. So we were talking about our experience as worship leaders. We were talking over lunch here. The keys position is kind of a hard one, not just to find volunteers for, but to really empower those volunteers, right? Mm-hmm. We came up with 4 simple ingredients. We're going to go through these really quickly so you can just walk away with some simple action steps that are going to immediately make an impact without requiring a bunch of effort, just changing the way you think, the way you talk, and giving you some momentum in the keys position. Now, if you're a worship leader or keys player, before we get into these ingredients, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because we put out a new video to help you level up your worship team every single week. All right, so let's dive right in. Ingredient 1 is simple: the right tools. When you think about the right tools for the keys position at your church, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, this comes into mind for any position at my church. If it's a production team member, if it's another worship band member, like a drummer, electric guitarist, I got to make sure they have the right tools. In those worlds, it could be a right drum kit that's tuned properly with the right cymbals. So for like a keyboard player, what does that look like? Well, it doesn't look like providing them with a 20-year-old Yamaha Clavinova upright little electric piano. Right. That's what I grew up with back in my original church.
Same.
I think they still have it because especially it just does not meet the demands of the sounds we're going for today with modern worship ministry, right?
Right.
So it needs to be kind of relevant to the sounds we need and want. And it also has to be simple so that anybody can navigate it within minutes and understand how to produce great key sounds, great pad sounds. A lot of our volunteers, majority of them are not sound designers. Some of them are. It's great when you come across those like power user keyboard players who just want to spend all day designing patches or downloading all the patches that you guys have and implementing them. A lot of my contacts though have been, we just need a really simple, powerful solution that anybody can learn in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. When we talk about the right tools, that's one component. And then the other is the empowerment to know how to use those tools. We're big fans of software like Mainstage, Ableton Live, but we can really quickly get in the weeds and I think paralyze the average volunteer. So picking good tools that are powerful and then figuring out how to sort of build a sandbox that any volunteer can feel comfortable and set up for success in has been probably the primary ingredient that's caused the volunteers on my team to actually get excited about the keys sounds that they can bring to the table.
Yep, and that's why I like software like Mainstage, because on the surface, you can set it up to be very simple and very intuitive. With the Sunday Keys template, you see just like, your couple faders, some knobs, color coding. It's all pretty and awesome. But for someone who's a power user, they can keep diving deeper and deeper into it, customize it more, only if they want.
You want things to be powerful, but they also just need to be reliable. So your volunteers don't have to worry about the computer crashing or a bad port on the keyboard getting unplugged or a sustain pedal that works about 75% of the time. These really simple ingredients that are sometimes easy for the worship leader to say, that's good enough, I'm going to be up front leading. The keys players really need to be able to trust these more complex rigs we're asking them to use. Otherwise, it might be a powerful tool, but that might not be the right tool for the average volunteer.
Ingredient number 2 is having a shared language between a worship leader and their keys player. I really like that video you guys came out with just like a week ago on your channel about things like keyboard players don't want their worship leader or don't want to hear from their worship leader. It was just hilarious. And that kind of actually made fun of that language and being able to articulate to each other what we mean by, I want some more pad. I want it brighter here. Oh, add some more shimmer.
Right.
Add some more energy or whatever, right? Like we can throw out a lot of jargon, especially as worship leaders who kind of live in this space all the time, but that could also really intimidate or confuse or throw off our keys players if you never actually break down for them like what you mean by these different words in the language that you use.
Well, and a lot of us worship leaders maybe come from more of a guitar background where some terminology might have a really concrete understanding across a wide number of musicians. But if you got somebody who's coming from a piano background where the piano sounds like the piano sounds, whatever room it's in, that's how much reverb's on the piano. And then you start talking about ambient reverb, hall reverb, shimmer, bright, dark. Those terms need to be broken down and defined at a very base level before you can even start to combine things together.
Because the majority of piano volunteers are coming from classically trained piano, who they all they know piano tone wise is maybe the difference between an upright and a grand piano.
Yeah.
But none of these effects and pads and synths.
And then the other common thing that we're running into now that keys have been more prominent for the last 5 years, is keys players are sort of developing their own definitions of what these buzzwords mean. So a shimmer effect to a keys player now might be something a little bit different than what a guitarist would expect, or a warm sound for a piano might not mean the same thing as like a warm acoustic guitar tone. So some folks we run into, the worship leader has a word that they use a lot. The keys player has a definition of that word, but they're mismatched. So sometimes it's as simple, I think, as just like writing down some of the words you know that you want to use to describe sounds, and then handing that sheet to your keys player and say, how would you define this? And then letting them answer, or letting maybe the most involved volunteers on your team give you that feedback, and then say, okay, you think of it in this way, I think of it in this way. Let's find common ground here so that we can really quickly make changes during a rehearsal or right before service on Sunday morning without having to say, oh, I didn't mean warm like that. I meant warm like this. Okay, so ingredient 3 is flexibility and empowerment. As worship leaders, obviously we want to deliver great music that ministers to and inspires our congregations, but we're also ministering to and pastoring the people that are volunteering on our team. So could you talk to how you balance the desire for a full sound to nail these keys parts with the fact that you've got a wide range of volunteers at different skill levels? How do you meet the needs of the band, the sound as a whole, and stay flexible and make sure those keys players feel empowered?
Yeah, I think it's important to just know every keys player as an individual, what their skill level is at, how adventurous they want to be and technical they want to be with the different sounds and patches that they can play with, and just ask them as a worship leader, be like, hey, like we have the capability with this software to do quite a bit. How much do you want to dive into this? And usually, at least I've found, they'll let me know. They'll be like, I just really want to stick with a solid piano sound, and that's it. And like, great. We just have a clear expectation. They're taking care of any like piano parts, and then everything else, if we want to bring in some backing tracks, we can do that with Ableton or whatever software we use there. But then there may be some other keys players who, like, I know I've played with both. Like they're at home, they're prepping their main stage session ahead of time or their concert ahead of time, and then when it comes to the backing tracks, I can shut pretty much everything off. So we're pretty much down to just click and guide. Most of the tracks, though, that we're using on a regular basis, since most of our volunteers kind of fall into, I want to focus on piano sounds with some maybe light pads in the background. Most of the tracks we're implementing with our band, because we have the rest of the band filled out, is those synths and fancy arpeggiating things, synth bass, a lot of percussion tracks too. But it really, you just have to take it on a case-by-case basis, and then also find an opportunity where maybe there's someone you could challenge to like actually try to up their game and learn some of these different parts. Again, you'll have to make sure they're equipped with the right tools to prep that at home, that they have main stage and a Sunday Keys template at home they could be working on, and maybe they could just do it on their computer and bring it to the church when they come on Sunday for rehearsal. So you just got to take it on an individual case-by-case basis, I think.
I think that's really important. And sometimes as worship leaders, we get so stuck on the big picture, like I've got this many volunteers, I'm trying to serve the whole team as like a collective. I found that sometimes I'll forget that it really doesn't take very long to get a lot of clarity with an individual person. Like if you ask people
Yeah.
for feedback, they probably already have it for you. It's not going to be a lot of effort for them to tell you how they feel. Most people are just waiting for that invitation to say, I actually really wish that you'd let me do more. Like when you leave the lead in the track, that's been kind of bothering me, but I didn't feel like they must want it in the track because they're putting it in there. Other people might feel like, man, I know what you're trying to do with software, but it's just really stressful for me. Like I'm really struggling to feel like I can hang with everybody else. How can you help? But those really like, send a text, have a coffee, like basic conversations with your volunteers can really point out areas of opportunity for growth and just bring clarity into how you can serve individuals on your team well.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. Worship leaders, be clear, ask questions of your volunteers or your team members, and then same thing with team members. Like I know as a worship leader, like if there's any unspoken feelings or expectations about how many tracks are in the mix or whatever, like just tell your worship leader, like voice it, because we'll kind of go off of our assumptions sometime, and then we just don't talk, and then that's when things like that can happen.
I also think when people first join the team, oftentimes they might assume that whatever everybody else is doing is what they're expected to do. So I think it's a great idea when you're onboarding somebody there's a billion different ways to do the keys position thing. That should be part of your onboarding, your interviewing process, or getting people up to steam. Like we use Planning Center, here's all these tools we use. And also, where's keys home base for you? Like, are you comfortable using sounds? If I say pad, do you know what that means? Like, this is kind of how we approach this. It's a great time to talk about that terminology and explain this is how the hardware connects to the software. Here's the power cord for the computer. Again, 5 or 10 minutes of your workflow dedicated to that, and you shouldn't ever have to do it again. But it's easy to overlook when you're focused on, I got to get this person on stage, and I got to tune my guitar, and I got to start rehearsal.
Yep. Try to make time to do this stuff before Sunday when there's no pressure, no rush.
Yep. And it'll end up saving you time down the road, either in like conversations over hurt feelings or in just trying to sort out why the same problem keeps happening with the hardware.
Yep.
Okay. So ingredient 4, I'm really excited to talk about because you brought up that you wanted to talk about transitions, vamping, and sort of the expectation the worship leader often puts on the keys player to handle it, whatever it means. Transition, tracks failed, the pastor's praying for 10 minutes instead of 1. We put a lot on the keys players in those moments to respond, to be ready to go. That's a great thing. Keys are good for that, but how do we do that responsibly and respectfully as worship leaders?
Yeah, it's because to me, this is the difference between more kind of amateur level keys player who's just able to show up, play the parts of the songs that are charted out, and then the ones who are like just more experienced, seasoned, pro level, the ones that really make my life easier as a worship leader. Because to me, I don't know, like maybe most worship leaders I think are wired to really feel and sense what happens in those transitional moments in worship, or especially when a pastor is wrapping up a sermon and the band comes back up. If that happens at your church, happens at mine, but we're so like kind of in tune with that, and it's important for the keys players to also be really in tune with the emotions, the mood going on at that certain point. So just like complement it and help kind of lead us to what's next kind of in the service. Yeah. So that, I don't know. And I wanted to ask you like how to better equip a keys player in this area, because this is like one of the biggest things I'm trying to train people on is like, because there's so much, I come across a lot of keys players that can just kind of be really timid about that.
Sure.
If they don't have a specific chart or song flow they're following. Usually I'll just tell them like, hey, you'll hear, for us, we have like the click in the tempo usually of the next song is kind of going in the background. We do have some ambient pads playing underneath, so there's some sort of foundation, and they can kind of work off of that. But I don't know, you probably have some videos on your channel or somewhere that talk about like how to like actually practically navigate those types of moments.
It's a learned skill, and I think one of the biggest reasons that it throws people off is because it's very hard to rehearse in the context you're actually going to be doing it. Right? Like the pastor doesn't come on stage during the sound check and practice praying or let you know like where they're going to go dynamically. So keys players often can feel kind of on the spot, and sometimes rightfully so. I think 2 things can be really helpful. One is just give people a few rules, like things that are always going to be okay to do. And I think you can get really practical. Like, it's always going to be okay to play the 1 chord and then go to the 4 chord.
Yep.
And then go back to the 1 chord.
Yep.
Like, and you said know your volunteers. So if you've got people that are more skilled, then you can say, here's a few other places you can take this. But give every volunteer, it's like, these are the chords that are always going to be okay to move between. And I also think, say stuff like, maybe at your church, let's not play the chorus of the next song instrumentally for 5 minutes.
Yeah, totally.
Because then when we get there, we've already been there for 5 minutes. Like some simple do this, and that's always going to be okay.
Yep.
And maybe try and avoid doing that. So keeping it really practical in that sense. And then I think the other thing you can do is actually give your keys players some progression ideas, like really simple, like, here's a progression that might feel a little bit uplifting. Here's a progression that's just really subdued, that's really sort of respectful, kind of stays way out of the way. And encourage your keys players like, hey, it doesn't always have to be a part of the next song or a part of the last one. Have 1 or 2 progressions in your back pocket that you can bring to the table.
Yep.
Maybe that even looks like just writing down, a single sheet with 4 progressions on it and giving it to every keys player that first joins your team and saying, you know what? Just practice this. And so just play between this with a piano and a pad. You can always go back to that. If we get off track, if we're not sure where we're at and we're looking at you to do something, you can do that thing.
Yep.
Again, it's just setting like a lowest common denominator for what will get things done, what will fill the space if absolutely necessary.
Yep.
And then in that freedom, where they know some things that are okay to do, some things that aren't okay to do, then people will start to stretch their legs in that and sort of within that lane, start to do stuff that might be a little bit more adventurous or maybe a little bit more thematically tied in with where you're going musically. But without those really basic restrictions and sort of permissions, most people will be like, I'm just going to play the intro to the next song for a really long time.
Yep.
And that just doesn't work long term. And it's not really like teaching them anything, right?
Yeah, I try to help my keys players understand they're almost, some of them are actually music directors or MDs, like that's their role in the band. I think it's kind of pretty common for the keys player to be that person.
Yep.
They might even be triggering tracks and doing all that stuff, have a talkback mic. But even keys players who primarily just worry about piano, playing the songs, not doing a whole lot of direction, they still have to be kind of a version of an MD, even in those, especially in those moments. So tomorrow, like you'll see, I'll tell you right now, we have opening song and then we have call to worship. And that's usually another one of our pastors come up and do that. It's like a reading and a prayer. You'll be vamping under that in the appropriate key, kind of getting us ready to go into the song after that. And then, usually we'll do the next 2 songs and then I'll pray at the end of song 3. And then you'll be playing at, probably in the same key and tempo as song 3.
Yeah.
And then I wrap it up. And then we go into bumper for the sermon. And then at the end of the sermon, we're going to come back up. I'll start the click and pads. You'll noodle there while he wraps up.
Yep.
And then we go into song 4. And then at the end of song 4, they come up for the benediction, and kind of dismissing announcements. And we still like to keep some music and energy under there. Then we do a postlude. So even there, you have like 1, 2, 3. There's like 4 or 5 spots in the service where, like, I'm telling you for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now you know.
Right.
You got to be prepared to do that. So
yeah, but like that is all the communication it really takes. Like if you gave me that in written form on PCO, I can take that and I can act on it.
Yep.
If I'm a new volunteer for the first time and you're walking me through, this is how we set out our order of service. When you need to do something, I'm just going to say, David, play this, or like David, handle transition. Those simple cues that take maybe an extra 2 seconds to add into PCO, explain like what that really means. Once somebody learns that, they can start to expect it. It's not going to take any extra time for your keys volunteers to prep for that. It's just going to be kind of in the back of their mind, like I'm going to need to have something ready for that moment. Okay, Jake, did we miss anything? Pretty comprehensive stuff.
We could talk all day about this stuff, but I think there's plenty of takeaways that folks will have from this.
Yeah, so we've done some other collaborations talking about the relationship between the keys player, the worship leader. We'll put links in the description to the other video collaborations that we've done, some on the Churchfront channel. You should absolutely check those out. And just in general, if you're a worship leader, Churchfront is an excellent resource for you to learn new ways that you can empower your team and raise the level of excellence across the board, from live sound to musicianship to live streaming. So head over to the Churchfront YouTube channel to check out all of that content, and we'll put links in the description to our other collaborations. Jake, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for having us, for hosting us here at Churchfront HQ. We'll see you in the next video.